Gamebreaker TV.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 1 of Monty's Minute, the show where you've got questions about the video game industry and he's got answers. That's kind of how it works. You send in questions, he answers them. First up, the man with the plan, Mr. Monty Sharma. How are you, sir?
Good, Gary. How you doing?
Good. Been a long time coming. Been waiting for this show for a long time. You and I have been friends for quite a while, but most of the people out there in TV land have no idea possibly who Monty Sharma is. So why don't we start with just a quick background of who you are and why the heck we're even doing this show?
Yeah. All right. So, hey, I'm a business guy in the video game industry. You can tell I'm a business guy because I have a white T-shirt on. Critical difference. You know, my background in video games as a player started in 1979, and maybe even 78.
Wow, you're dating yourself.
All my life. Well, hey, we're on video. Everybody knows I'm old and fat. But, you know, in terms of business, geez, around 2004, started to be one of the co-founders for Vivox. So we do voice chat for games, EVE Online, a bunch of Sony Online games, some stuff with EA, Nexon, a bunch of other folks. So got heavy into the gaming industry, and where I met you through that period. And then last year and a half or so, I've been working with MassDigi, which is the Massachusetts Institute of Digital Games. So we work with a whole lot of publishers and developers in Massachusetts, a lot of students, and folks like that. So I do a lot of business mentoring, and we actually developed 3 games this summer as part of a student program. So I've seen.
And you were one of the guys. You've been around so much of it, right? You're one of the guys that I met at conferences and things like that. And Monty's kind of the guy that just seems to know a lot of people. So it's not only the MMO space as well. I just want to kind of throw that out there for you guys to have questions. We're going to take questions about anything in the video game industry. If you guys have console questions, cloud computing questions, anything you guys want to throw at us, you can. And if you want to send in your questions, you could send them to Monty at Gamebreaker.tv. So that's how you send in your questions. And each and every week, we're going to pick some of them and we're going to answer them right here on the show. Tell me really quickly about some of those games that you guys put out this year. What did you put out?
So we did actually 3 games. 2 of them were serious. One was a entertainment game. So the entertainment game you can actually download off the App Store right now. It's called Nano Swarm. And it was really cool. A group of students came up with the idea of a bunch of nanobots reaching sentience inside of this lab and trying to escape. And so you've got, you know, turrets and puzzles and things like that. You got to split your cloud up. It's a neat game, and you know, everybody should go download it, try it out, and you know, look at that and say, hey, here's what 5 students did this summer in about 8 weeks worth of work.
It is really getting the tools, and tools are just they're becoming, it's becoming so much easier to just be creative, right? With, I don't know what you guys built it on, but just, you know, you see things like Unity and stuff like that, and it's just amazing what you know, potential developers out there, if you've got it in your brain, you can hopefully get it out onto a screen at this point. All right, but let's get into some questions. Let's start it off. So first up, this question came in from Kenny Barras. And he says, first of all, he says, now this is cool, pertaining to the show. Thank you. Thank you. We actually got a lot of requests. We're starting the show. We get so many questions about the business of video games. We don't really have a show about it. So people would ask about, you know, education, or how do I break into the industry, or, you know, why does it, a lot of questions about like, why do you think developers are doing this, and free to play versus subs, all that kind of stuff. We get all those questions. We haven't really had a platform to kind of voice it. So here we are. So Kenny starts off and says, now this is cool. Question for Monty. Is the rise of always online single player gaming experiences the industry's way of cashing in on gamers' wallets for maximizing profits? Or is it more geared towards social engineering and viral marketing to increase footprint?
Yeah. All right. So look, let's just start off by saying that it is a video game business. So, one of the things I'll tell you for sure is everybody who's a developer, so I'm not talking about the publishers, but the developers, they're all people who love to play games. They love playing games, they love making games, they're making less money than they probably could in other industries. And they're in the game industry because they love games. Now, they got to eat. They got kids who got to eat. And that means they need to make money. And so, I think what we're seeing, and I'll actually extend your question to say it's not just single player online, I think it's multiplayer online. Everybody is trying to find ways to increase the engagement, drive the connections, and make more money, right? So let's talk about a few of the things that what free-to-play does for a game company. So number one is it really cuts your marketing cost, because when you try and get a game adopted by people, you got to get them to try the damn thing. In a lot of cases, people are spending $20 to get somebody to try the game initially. That's a ton of money, right? I'm talking about a box product in that case. Your initial launch target, you can shell out a ton of money. You turn around and you say, okay, look, now that I've got this user, I need to know a whole bunch of things. I need to be able to iterate my design. And by that I mean, I've given you the game, but I don't quite know how everybody's going to play my game, no matter how much testing I do and all of that. I don't know what you're going to do. And so every game we worked on this summer, every game developer I know has their game full of analytics. And that's why they want you to be online all the time, is they're phoning home and they're saying, the player played this level for this long, they stopped playing here, they got stuck here. Here's the heat map of, in the Nanoswarm game, we were looking at heat maps of where players were spending most of the time, and then you look at your map and you say, they can't figure this puzzle out. I need to make this a little easier or a little harder. Here's how I'm going to make my game better. So, that's all about making a better game. The other part of, this online trend is I can update the content, whether it's DLC or it's free. More content means I don't have to get you to be a player again. And that's always hard, right? If I put out a new game and then I've got to get you to sign up for my new game, pain in the neck. When I've got you, I want to keep you. And then, the next thing I think is money. So I drew some charts out for you, Gary, if you want to pull out the first one. And let's just talk about the difference between, free-to-play and pay-to-play. So this is a really simple chart. It's got users on the bottom, so more users as you go out, and it's got revenue on the top, or their willingness to pay, what they're willing to spend. So normally, if I'm a company, I'm going to pick a price point. So let's go to chart number 2. And I'll pick a price point and I'll say, hey, here's my one-time fee. It's $1.99. Well, you draw the line over from $1.99, you go down, and that's how many users will pay $1.99. The problem is there's some users who love the game so much they pay more than $1.99. There's lots of users who don't really want to give you $1.99. They may not give you butkus. And so they're not even going to try your game. So I've spent more money marketing trying to get you to try my game. And then I'm losing revenue on both ends of the equation. So if we go to the third one, what free-to-play does is it essentially gives the user a chance to say, hey, I'm going to pay X to play this game. Now, to be perfectly honest, when it first started, it annoyed me. I'd look at a game and I'd say, gee, what they're charging for this virtual currency is pricey, and wow, I spent $10 playing that game and I'm not thrilled about it. And over time, I sort of changed my attitude, because I used to buy a lot of boxed games, especially 10 years ago or so. And about 1 in 3 were great games, So true, so true. The great games are always few and far between. It's always been like this. Yeah, and you're sitting there and you're steaming because you paid $50 this thing's mediocre. You got maybe 5-10 minutes worth of pleasure out of it, and then it's like, screw it, I'm on to something else. So with free to play, you know, and there's been, in fact, most of the games I'm playing right now on mobile are all free to play. What I'm finding is I'll start the game and I'll play it, and after I've played it for 20-30 minutes, I'll say, wow, I kind of like this. Now, I'm an old guy, I've got a family, I got a job. I don't have a lot of time to grind through the free currency stuff, but I have money. So I'll lay down $10, and the game developer now got $10 for me, and 5 of you guys who don't have the money can play for free on me. Enjoy it. And that's how the system works. And every game developer finds that there's a few whales out there. These are people who will spend $60 a month, $100 a month on the game because they like it so much, they want to be so embedded in it, and that's okay too. So the game developer catches the revenue from the guy who's willing to pay $100 a month down to the guy who says, I like the game, but I don't have the money, I'm not willing to pay. So that's, you know, that's really what's happening in the market, and this is a model I think that's here to stay. I think
what and I'm going to read into the viewer's question here a little bit, but I'm thinking what might be on their mind slightly was the whole Diablo 3 debacle of buying a single, you know, essentially a single player game that had to be connected to the internet, and if you had trouble with that, you couldn't play the game. And I think that's what's turned, like, a lot of gamers have that question in mind right there. I mean, do you think the bad publicity, like from Blizzard, that came out of that whole thing will affect any of that, or they just need to kind of fix the tools and get it right, and it'll kind of it'll kind of iron itself out?
Yeah, I think over time it'll do itself better. In some ways, you know, at least in North America and large parts of Asia, we live in an always connected environment, right? So I'm always online. I want enough Wi-Fi in the world to cook a chicken at 100 feet. You know, it always pisses me off if I'm offline. But as you well know, I travel a lot. And so I'm sitting on an airplane, I want to play a game, and no, can't phone home. That's a problem. So there's some games that are starting to think about it the right way. So there's a title on the iPad called Spice Invaders. And the way they work it is, hey, if you're offline, you can still play the game. We're going to save your accomplishments and your scores and all that sort of stuff. Next time you connect, we'll send it up to the cloud, and you can do things, but you can't access the store and a few other online features. I actually think that's a really good model. And, you know, especially for a single-player game like Diablo, makes a lot of sense. Hey, look, you know, we're going to let you go this long or whatever without being connected, because sometimes the internet goes down, and enjoy your game.
It does sound like a lot better, a lot less frustration on the player's part, and they would completely understand that. But it makes a lot of sense on the analytical side for them to try and hone in and figure out the game and kind of make tweaks and nerfs and buffs and things like that. And just, which went to our next question. JuDa ReSt asked the question saying, in your opinion, which has the better payment model, buy to play or free to play? Kind of dovetails in with your free to play. So, so what do you think? Buy to play or free to play?
You know, if it's a game I know is awesome, I'd rather just buy to play. Unfortunately, you usually don't know that going in, and so free to play, I think once people get over the hurdle, you know, this summer when we were working with a number of students would say, free to play is just a way to rip people off, and it's like, wait a minute, you don't have any money, you're a student. You weren't going to buy the damn game. You might have ripped it off from somewhere, and now you get to play it for free, but you're complaining you don't get all the benefits that a guy like me who's pumping money into the game is getting, you know? And that's just like tough noogies. The game industry right now is making a lot more money on free-to-play. When you see the metrics and you see what game developers are able to do with it, they're not going to move away from it. Everybody's trying to find ways to leverage it.
Are you seeing the metrics that you're seeing? Are they totally just all that direction of they're making a lot more money in the free to play market? Because I've heard also stories about how, you know, there's like 0.1% of the people out there who will actually spend money on a free to play game, and I don't know if that differs from game to game. Like if a game like League of Legends, who obviously gets it right, are making just, you know, lots of the revenue is just flowing in nonstop, as opposed to other games who maybe just don't, it doesn't click right. Is it just across the board, or is that 0.1% or whatever the percentage actually is that just enough to where it still is more profitable than a buy to play or a box price?
The industry averages are more like 5 to 10% are the averages, I believe. I've heard some people tell me 20%. Wow. And I usually don't believe them when they say 20% of the people pay. 5% of the people playing, absolutely. More interestingly, that 5% of the people is typically paying, I'm going to say 3 to 5 times on average what that same kind of game would make as a subscription.
So that one person is worth 3 to 5 people, basically.
Right. And because you don't have that marketing hurdle and you don't have people not buying your game because it costs something, you get a lot more people trying. And so your net revenue goes way up. Right? So it is very profitable for game companies to do it. But look, let's not forget, if your game sucks, your game sucks. It doesn't matter what your business model is.
That's where this all starts. You're only going to make money if your game is really good. To make good games, yeah, that's the truth. Let's go to the next question from Nicholas Garduno. Nicholas says, do you think we'll see a resurgence of pay-to-play MMOs as the world economy improves and people have more money to spend on games, or are free-to-play just too profitable?
Yeah, I think you will never see, well, I won't say never. I'll say it's going to be really stinking hard for a pay-to-play MMO to make it. It has to have some sort of killer IP, be massively perfect, and, you know, it's going to cost $200 million to make. And which guy in his right mind is going to spend $200 million on an MMO these days?
So I don't know. After Star Wars, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people are looking at the industry going, if they couldn't do it, wow, we are really rolling the dice.
Yeah, APB was 100 million in. You know, you look at all of these MMOs that have come out lately, and it's like, the players, there's a couple of things about MMOs in this market. Let me talk about that for a sec. The one thing is the actual player base of MMOs is not huge. Okay? And part of that is it takes a long time to play an MMO. You need to have, you know, X number of hours a week to really be an MMO player. And you remember, you know, my love for Global Agenda was I can play it for 15 minutes.
Right,
you know?
I can jump in, I can have some fun, and I can jump out.
And I'm glad, because that's all the time I had. I don't have the depth of play that you did, and so you were frustrated with, hey, there's not enough content, there isn't this, there isn't that. You think about MMOs, there's only so many of those, and every time you launch an MMO, and I see it on Facebook, because, you know, 2/3 of my friends are in the game development business. I'll see it on Facebook, MMO rolls out, they all roll off for a couple of weeks, and they play the game, and there's part of it is they're not as uber as they were in the last game they've been playing or that first game they played, and they see what it's like, and it's cool, and it's neat, and it's like, yeah, it's really another MMO, and that's good, and I'm going to go back to paying for the one that I don't really play all that much anymore, and wait for the next one to come out. So I think the market for MMOs is limited, especially the hardcore MMOs. I think you're going to find MMO elements rolling into some RPGs, and, you know, we'll get sort of a mid-core blend of these things. But I don't know who's going to put up a lot of money for an MMO these days. Would you call
it a ceiling? Because a lot of people out there feel like the MMO is sort of the genre and the player base is topped out, and the ceiling has been met. Do you think we're at that point?
I think so. I think somebody's going to have to do a very different MMO. somebody's going to have to come at it from a different angle or a way that captures a larger player base. And if you look at the rise of mobile gaming and tablet gaming, is it something that comes out on tablet? And so, hey, between my phone and my tablet, I can play, 10, 15 minutes here and there all day long. Maybe. But, the depth, the engagement, all of that stuff in a big MMO is really hard to come by. And then you've got a lot of really good MMOs that are out there who keep shining and polishing what they're doing. But if you look at WoW, right, Pandaria, who's excited to play a panda? That's specifically targeted at the Chinese market.
Yeah, and I think that, and also younger kids, right? I think they're probably going after a younger demographic to kind of bring in some new blood as some of the older veterans start moving away from World of Warcraft. That's been my take on it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's more going after, Chinese market, seeing if they can get expansion there. They might get some expansion into kids. North America, there's enough of a brand that you'll get that rising. But I think the market here is tapped out. And so, the market in Asia might lead to some new things because there's still a whole lot of people who haven't played yet.
Interesting. Keeping up with the free-to-play discussion. Next question coming in from Roman and Guiano. He says, can free-to-play games thrive on consoles?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. We've seen some of that start to happen, like XBLA and PSN. The interesting thing was the rise of these small arcade games, and so the game industry really took notice of that. You saw a number of developers, rushing to build for that. The systems aren't elegantly in place on those platforms yet to do free-to-play well. They're coming quickly. And I think probably the biggest test of that in the next year is going to be Dust 514. Mm-hmm. So here's a game that's going to sell, maybe 1 million units, which would be huge, and be, free to play. It's a hardcore game. It takes advantage of all the great stuff you can do on a console. It's a gorgeous game. And, I think that's going to sort of set the high watermark, and it'll be interesting to see what console developers do. I know they're all watching Dust.
What do you think about, you mentioned, talking about being a hardcore game, and I noticed, a lot of the talk about free-to-play and stuff, like a lot of people looking at the mobile space and the tablet space as the growing segment of the market. But what do you think of free-to-play, like really tackling the hardcore market? Is that really where we see kind of like a lack of development, or are there a lot of people working on games right now that kind of cater to that market?
Yeah, so there's two elements there. One is, the first guys to really tackle free-to-play in the West was Turbine with DDO and Lotro, where they were the first serious MMO, pure Western company, not an offshoot of an Asian company, who said we're going to go free-to-play. Those are hardcore games. That's not, where the fringe is. True. I think the next actual area of growth you're going to see is going to be what in the business we're calling mid-core games. So a mid-core game it's meant for guys like you and me who are serious gamers, but it's not quite, I need a console to play it or I need 20 hours a week to play it, but it's a much more serious game. So Robot Rising from Stomp Games, it's up on Facebook right now. It's in beta. It's a robot, you're going through tunnels. It's an RPG. It's interesting. They've got a good bit of work to do. They're in beta, but it's fun. It's engaging. It's not one of these simple little flash games. Look at Mech Warrior Tactics, which is taking a page out of League of Legends and some other games, and it's a fairly serious mech game. Lots of stuff to figure out, but again, you can play a game in 10 to 15 minutes. You can spend hours customizing your mech, but it gives you that whole area. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of game developers who rush to the casual side, like Zynga saying we're going to do Facebook games or mobile games, are saying, you know what? Gamers play games, so let's build some stuff that's cheaper, less risk to make, that we can hit these gamers where they live, and that's the mid-core.
All right, next up, this question from Dewey Cooksey. Dewey asks, how do developers test their systems? Are there any automated processes that can iterate through all of the variations of the design, or must everything be tested manually? So looking for a little insider info.
Yeah, so I'm sure half of your viewers want me to answer, they don't test anything, they just toss it out and let you test it. That is not true. So there are, I'm going to say, three sort of major kinds of testing that happen. And I'll tell you a couple of stories about things that get missed too. So one of the things is, yes, there is automated testing. So you know what we call scripted testing. So you set up a machine, and the computer will actually test all the components. Generally, you can find, you know, sort of in programming what we call syntax errors, game logic errors that are just flawed. This doesn't work here, it's broken. Okay, great. You know, a lot of times the programmer smoke testing it, I'll figure that out. And actually the programmers themselves are the first round of QA. They'll write the code, they test it. Most companies of any size will actually peer review the code. That means another programmer's looked at the code. Code goes to QA. QA has scripts that they've built that'll test some things. Then in any major game, there's a lot of play testing where they're looking at, does it make sense? Was it fun? No script is ever going to tell you, was it fun? Was it too hard? Was it too easy? Well, you know, tell me about that. As they go through all of that, the next round is the beta test, getting third parties, you know, people outside to play the game. And that's, you know, a critical element. And, you know, when I talk about heat maps or tracking what the user's doing, these are all the things where they really find out a lot of what's happening on the game, and they try and polish it a lot. So this will take months. You know, in fact, properly, every time I hear somebody talking about it, doing testing properly, anywhere from 30 to 50% of your game development cycle is spent in the testing phase.
Wow.
So, you know, so a lot of testing goes on, but there's stuff you just is really, really hard to test for. One of the things on MMOs, and it's remarkable how good they are now, but I think back, you know, several years, scaling to test what happens when 50,000 people hit a login server. No way you could do that, right?
Really? See, I think that's funny, because I think that's something that everyone takes for granted, because like, you know, we hear of, like, you know, just this week we hear about hackers DDoSing Blizzard so they can make a little tool to just bombard a login server. It's like, why couldn't developers just make some sort of tool that just hammers a server?
So you can try and DOS a server, but that's different than the user behavior when people log in. So, you know, what's the curve as they log in? What's the signaling that's going back and forth? What sort of unforeseen delays and all of that? So that's gotten a lot better over the last few years. So that, you know, as games have scaled, it used to be funny. We'd be out selling VVOX, which scaled really well, was really stable, and a new competitor would come in the market and they say, we scale because of our design. And I'd look at any, you know, tech director of a game company in the eye and I'd say, hey, we scale because we have. We've hit the walls, we've gone through them, we know how to do it. What do you think they've thought of everything that they're going to hit before? And the answer was, no, they haven't. And that's, you know, we'd win deals over and over again because of that. The other thing, though, that happens is you get freakish behavior when it's in the wild. So you have people running all sorts of stuff on their computers. You have all sorts of weird configurations. You have bizarre stuff happening on networks. And all of that stuff together, you can't really test for. I mean, I'll give you an example of, we put out, I'll give you two examples. We put out one chunk of code. Everything's running stably. Windows 8's coming out. We test against Windows 8. Everything internally runs fine. We put it on two different staging servers of the customer. So the customer runs it on their staging servers for probably a month and a half, with a bunch of people using it. Everything runs fine. They go to live, and all of a sudden we're getting, 5%, 10% of users, and the numbers going up, having login problems. What the hell? Finally, one of our guys tracks it down, and it is if you're running Windows 8 and you are using a certain kind of scripting language and you have a heap size of over so many million objects, the speed at which Microsoft's API for encryption responds changes. And when that changes, it blows up our login. To this day, I don't know how the hell he figured that out.
Wow. So it's almost, like you said, it sounds like it's almost impossible to ever set up a scenario to find something like that until you just have to put out in the wild and let your users kind of like come up with those situations for you.
And then once you find it, then you say, okay, we now know a class of a problem, and we work in the future to avoid that. And and that becomes why an old gray-haired programmer is worth a lot, because they've seen so many of those problems. So, that's why you'll still see things in testing, and I know I've done it. I've seen lots of people do it. Bugs still slip through.
All right, last up, the questions for this episode. This one's in from Jeremy Keat. It's a bit of a long one. You ready? So Jeremy says, why do games always seem to have something major missing in them to appease any crowd completely these days? I'm not talking about 100% bug-free, but I'm talking about actual game features that seem in demand in large by the gamer market. What way, or do you think some issues come down to production management of a game company? Every MMORPG out there seems to have some major downside to them or some superior route not taken. That's good man for taking this question, because this one's tough. I don't even know where you're going to go with this one, because that's a rough one.
Yeah, the hard thing, and this is why MMOs really struggle in the marketplace. When you look at an MMO today, so let's say you play WoW or you play Eve, you should have played them 8 years ago, right? 8 years ago, they were completely different games. They had all sorts of systems missing. They had all sorts of functionality missing. Now, both of those games have had 8 years of hundreds of programmers working to make them better. So new game comes along, and what are you going to do? Well, all right, your production values have to be spectacularly awesome. You need tons of content. Everybody wants 13 different classes with 12 different races, and you've got to balance all this stuff. And then you got somebody griping about the crafting system isn't quite right, or, hey, you did really, what was it? Was it Pirates? It was an SOE game. It was actually the sailing part of the game was fun, but the sort of on-land ship combat was fairly cruddy when it launched. It took them a while to fix that. It got better, but they were smeared because, when they rolled out, that part was weak. And so I think part of the problem is, and this actually, when we talk about the end of massively new MMOs or somebody taking a ton of risk on this stuff, I think it comes down to really this question, is the players have started to expect so much stuff at the beginning that they go into this game and they go, oh, yeah, that's kind of nice. Oh, they don't have that. Well, hell, we'll come back later. And they go, and that just kills MMOs.
And they don't come back later. That's the thing, right? Do you think, leading off it, do you think that the future of sort of the MMO market is going to lean a little bit more towards like what we've seen with the recent success of games like World of Tanks, where they've come out, they do one thing, they go, this is what we do tank, we do PvP, and this is what we're going to do, and they just go with that, and it's much more compartmentalized, and they don't have to cater to like 8 or 9 different types of players. They cater to one.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at World of Tanks, look at Guild Wars. And what they've done is they've segmented that play. You're not wandering through Eastern Europe. You're rolling into a tank battle. That's it. And then you're done. Get the hell out. Go back to your garage. So what they have to build, how they have to manage it, all of that is infinitely easier. And so, it's almost... I mean, personally, back in the day, I probably wouldn't have called World of Tanks an MMO to begin. You know, Guild Wars 2, all of the instancing and all of that stuff, not the same thing of what you expected with EverQuest 2 or WoW or any of that stuff. So I think that's what you're going to see is more games that are grows up as an RPG, gets really good, people are right into it, they like it, and then it's, hey, you can do PvP combat in it. Oh, that's cool, that's fun, I like that. We got some bigger arenas, now we've got some more stuff, and now we're sort of a next-gen MMO.
Interesting stuff, my friend. Episode 1 of Monty's Minute. If you guys have questions for Monty, you can send them to submit@gamebreaker.tv. We love video questions as well. If you guys got a video question, you can record yourself, post it up to the old YouTube there, and send that to the email address as well. Just send us the link. Monty Sharma, you can follow him on Twitter at Monster27 right there. And look forward to hearing more and more about the business of video games. Interesting stuff. Keep your web browser locked in, dialed into Gamebreaker.tv all day, every day for all your video game news, and we will see you next week.